everybody. Yes, let it rip. That that was a slow start. Anybody got a question? Which president was Munn versus Illinois under? Doesn't matter. But there is a huge difference between Munn and Wabash. Munn, the Supreme Court rules that it is entirely proper for a state to regulate a big business in the interest of the public good. Wabash, 7-8 years later, Supreme Court rules that a state cannot regulate a multi-state corporation because that multi-state corporation extends beyond the boundaries of the state. That's why we need an Interstate Commerce Commission, because only the federal government can regulate a interstate commerce. Okay. Can you explain what questioning the silver was? I'm going to need you to rephrase that question. Significance of Coxey's Army. Panic of 1893. They're unemployed. They're farmers. They're factory workers. They're the average Joes who are angry and oppressed. So they're marching toward Washington because they want a public works program where the government will pay them to build roads or bridges or something or other so they can feed their families. They don't get anywhere, but it shows you just how desperate people are in this time period. Queen Liliuokalani, doesn't she ask for her Hawaii back? And she doesn't get it. Why is that? There are 7 big reasons why Americans want Hawaii, want to expand. So, yeah, I mean, Queen Lil, she wants her country back. Yeah, okay. There was a debate over the coinage of silver. Come on now. You need to narrow that down a little bit. You guys are asking me to do your terms for you. So Ballinger Pinchot, William Howard Taft fires Gifford Pinchot from being chief forester of the United States. This is what angers all the progressive Republicans and causes Teddy Roosevelt to run for president in 1912 as a progressive. Okay, Federal Reserve Act. I know they issue federal paper currency, but are they owned by individual banks if it is federal? Yeah, I don't know what you're referring to. The Federal Reserve Act does 2 things. It sets up the Federal Reserve System, which is a series of government banks that only banks can work with. Remember, one of the big problems with the national bank back in the 1830s was it was competing for people's business, just like the state banks. The Federal Reserve banks, and I think there's like 12 of them, they only bank with other banks. Normal, regular people can't go there. So you set up a government banking system for the speeding up or slowing down of the loaning of money. And you also set up paper currency that is backed by gold. That's the Federal Reserve Act. Okay. Significance of Philippines question. David, I'm going to need you to rephrase that and help me with a real question there. Okay. Initiative and referendum. Treya, we've been over this a number of times. If you believe the state legislatures are corrupt, then you have to somehow bypass the state legislatures. Ballot initiative allows people to put their names on a petition. If you get enough names on the petition, the initiative gets placed on the November ballot where the people can vote on it directly. Now, you can pass laws without the state legislature ever getting in the picture. Referendum, state legislature passes crummy laws, you have an opportunity to strike those laws down without the state legislature getting in the picture. Okay, we've been there. It's about direct political power in the hands of the people, taking it away from the state legislatures. Okay. Maya, we didn't talk much about Grover Cleveland's presidency, and there is a reason for that. Is haze significant at all? No, I don't think so. We haven't spent much time talking about them. Okay. Karan, we literally just gave a 30-second spiel on initiative. So acquiring or not acquiring the Philippines, there are lots of motivations for expansion. New markets, white man's burden, social Darwinism, European competition, the desire to export American democracy, Alfred Thayer Mahan suggesting we need naval bases, Frederick Jackson Turner saying that we need to keep America strong and vibrant by expanding. Those are all reasons to keep the Philippines. China market, Philippines are right next to China. They're our duty to Christianize, civilize the Filipinos. Those are all reasons to acquire the Philippines. The arguments against expansion, it's immoral, it's undemocratic, it will lead us into wars. And by acquiring foreign lands, we are going to encourage those people to resettle in the United States, and they will pollute our society. Okay. So, Nikita, define for me what the Crime of 73 is, and we'll talk about what's going on with silver, right? Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah, Panic of 1907 is not a severe panic. Okay. Why did the fusion of the Populist and Democratic Party occur? Because they both nominate the same person for president, William Jennings Bryan. Okay, that's why. I don't think there is a significant difference between the city manager system and city commissions. City managers usually operate in a small town, small size city like Plymouth, Michigan, or something that's small enough that one person can kind of manage day-to-day affairs. City commission, when you have a bigger community that requires a number of people working on issues. Okay. How did Jennings lose the presidential race? Because he's a great speaker and the farmers vote for him, but the factory workers are scared. The big business owners more or less told their workers that if Bryan wins the presidency, they may have to close the factory. People vote with their pocketbooks. So for a lot of factory workers, they're going to vote McKinley because they want to keep their jobs. Hull House is an actual building. Yes, a settlement house is in fact an actual community center / soup kitchen / homeless shelter. Yeah. Socialists, they are anti-capitalism. They want to see the current economic system torn down and replaced with a government-run economy where the workers share in all of the wealth and means of production. Workers become owners, essentially, and share all the fruits of their labor. Anti-capitalism, not a big fan of big business, trust, monopolies. I think Eugene Debs and Big Bill Haywood are the people you need to concentrate on when you talk about the socialists. Good question here. New freedom versus new nationalism. Woodrow Wilson's New Freedom wants to destroy trusts. Teddy Roosevelt's New Nationalism wants social justice through government action, using the power of the government to go full progressive. And that can be in lots of different areas of life. New Freedom, from my understanding, reading the book, looking at some of the materials on the test, New Freedom is a little more about destroying trusts. Okay. Sub-treasury system, another good question. The government builds a series of warehouses. When the economy's bad, farmers will store their grain in those warehouses and wait for the prices to come back up. When the prices come back up, the farmers sell their grain. This way, they can perhaps make a profit by selling their grain instead of taking a beating. A small part of the plan was that the government would float them loans at a very low interest rate that would tide them over till the economy picks up. So I'm going to roll out their sub-treasury plan. It's basically a government safety net for farmers when the economy's bad. Okay. Yeah, I think the line there about new nationalism regulating versus destroying monopolies is a good one. But one of the things I had written down in my notes is that new nationalism goes a little bit further than just regulating big business. When Roosevelt talks about social justice, that's a term that is a little bit aligned with the social gospel movement. And now you're talking about making sure that nobody's exploited, that workers have enough and share in the profits, making sure that we reduce child labor, working on the workplace conditions. It goes a little bit further. I like the succinctness, though, of new freedom, get rid of monopolies, new nationalism, regulating them. But that social justice component is part of Roosevelt as well. We saw that when he was president. Hull House is the first settlement house. La Follette, he exists. Is that a question? No, the open door policy does not incorporate the Chinese. That's why they're so angry when we get the Boxer Rebellion. Teddy Roosevelt sends the open door notes to all the European powers. We're going to share the Chinese market. Nobody consulted the Chinese. So they stage a revolution, the Boxer Rebellion, and they want to kick all the foreigners out of China. And then you get into the whole Europeans, Americans send soldiers to China to crush the Boxers so we can have the marketplace there. Okay. Good trust versus bad trust is a Teddy Roosevelt thing. Typically, we associate the quote unquote good trust versus bad trust with Roosevelt's time in office from 1900 to 1907. Okay. When did Woodrow Wilson become progressive? It's funny. He does start out being a little, trying to be a little bit more moderate than Teddy Roosevelt, but his actions the first 2-3 years in office are super duper progressive. He thinks Woodrow Wilson believes by 1914 he's kind of checked all the boxes on his progressive list, but he keeps going into 1915, 1916 because that's what the public wants. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to describe conservation versus preservation. Conservation using the land responsibly, preservation is keeping it wild. Yep. Yep. Hmm. What caused the panic of 1893? What always causes the depression, right? You get oversupply or overproduction, which leads to high supply, which means the low prices. Maybe you get people, wishy-washy. The value of land sales goes down. I don't think you need to worry about what caused that panic. And I don't think you need to come up with a distinction between Sherman and Clayton. They are both attempts to regulate big business, to be able to break up trusts. I think Sherman dates from the 1880s. Clayton occurs under Woodrow Wilson. It's one of those things you can put to his list of progressive action, right? Clayton antitrust is passed during the Wilson administration. But I don't know that you need to get super detailed in the weeds on how those differ. Opposition to women's suffrage. I mean, there are people who think that when you allow women into the nastiness that is politics, it's going to hurt them. That women are pure and need to be kept above the fray. I think there are concerns that women will just vote the way that their husbands vote, or that women don't know enough about politics to be good voters. None of those are good answers, but there you go. How is the new middle class formed? Uh, Time and possessions, right? So middle management, managers, supervisors, clerks, office workers. They've got a little extra time because they tend to make a little more money, have a little more education, they have a little more cash, a little more time. I think where we want to be careful, we want to talk about the new women. That I think is a new development. Women having more time around the house thanks to labor saving devices. having fewer kids. Kids are in school. That allows women to go out and get a job if they desire. Um, Temperance movement. Yeah, I mean it's been around since the 1830s. I think what changes is progressives now have their hands on the wheel, but also World War One, and we're going to see this next unit. World War One is an excuse for an awful lot of progressive legislation. You save grain for the soldiers at war, so basically the country goes kind of sort of dry while the war is going on, and then once the war is over, I mean, why bring booze back? Were all the amendments in this chapter under Woodrow Wilson? I'm pretty sure they are. 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah, Nathan, that's not bad either. If you give women the right to vote, they'll help work in the temperance movement. At least that's what I think you're saying, Nathan. That if you give women the right to vote, then you'll pass prohibition. But I'm pretty sure we get prohibition first and women's suffrage second. Prohibition is the 18th Amendment, and women's suffrage is 19th. Progressives were very big into eugenics. Remember, they're into social cohesion. They want society to be uniform and everybody pulling in the same direction. And undesirables that would pollute society tend to work against that social cohesion. So the progressives are actually, there are some progressives who are eugenicists. And to be honest with you, there are some progressives that are nativists. Remember that one of the arguments against uh, American expansion is that foreigners, Cubans, Guamians, Filipinos, going to come to America and pollute our society. So I think your progressives can be eugenicists. Your progressives can be nativists. I've talked about the kind of dark side to progressivism that lurks underneath, and those are two really good examples: nativism and eugenics. Two really good examples of that dark side. Mm. We answered Sherman and Clayton about 4.5 minutes ago. Scroll up. 16th Amendment is your. Google it. I can't believe I was even going to say that. Oh, you bailed him out, Sampin. Clever move on the eugenics. Okay, now I'm confused about the 16th and 17th Amendment. Good job, gang. Four Acre Act is making Puerto Rico an American colony and making the territory U.S. territory. And then women's suffrage 19th. Because when you're 18, you still can't drink. Huh, interesting. Yes, recall does remove elected official from office, right? There's not much to the Newlands Act. It is about reclaiming Western territory that is too dry to be used. So dams, reservoirs, irrigation systems, canals, bridges, way to revitalize Western agriculture. What are Wobblies? Members of the International Workers of the World, a socialist labor organization. Cross of Gold? I have one. Dude, Coron, you got to ask better questions, man. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what you want there. Cross of Gold exists. The difference between the amendments that helped Cuba and the amendments that made Cuba a puppet. Okay, so spam. Before the Spanish-American War, you get the Teller Amendment. We promise we're not going to annex Cuba as a state. After the Spanish-American War, you get the Platt Amendment, which is a piece of the Cuban Constitution. We put it there. We tell them we're going to put an amendment in their Constitution that guarantees America the right to send soldiers down to Cuba and intervene if any American lives or property are at risk. So the Platt Amendment is not found in the U.S. Constitution. It is found in the Cuban Constitution, and it guarantees America the right to intervene. Significance of the Cross of Gold. Now we're getting somewhere. Cross of Gold is William Jennings Bryan's famous speech about why we need to coin silver. He makes a biblical reference here that we are crucifying the workers of America on a cross of gold. By sticking with the gold standard, there's not enough money in circulation. The farmers are taking a beating. The factory workers are taking a beating. By coining silver, we're going to solve problems for all the downtrodden in America. Okay. Oh, that's cold-blooded. Siddiqui, progress. Nice. Yeah, the goals of the progressives. Talked about this Friday. Take a look at your idea map right smack dab at the beginning. Social critics, the progressives are social critics. What do they want? They believe that society can be improved with intervention. They want experts to help us determine the proper course and to take our cue from the experts in fields that will help improve society. They want social cohesion. They don't want immigrants doing their thing in ethnic enclaves, and they don't want kids working and other kids in school. They want cohesion. They want everybody marching in step in the same direction. Hepburn Act is part of the Square Deal. Regulate the railroads. Which, as Garan mentioned, is the whole reason we have the ICC in the first place. ICC, not ITC. Oh, look at that. It's like, oh my God, this is like the Grange. Hall, Siddiqui, you've turned this into a social club. Significance of that one medical school. Yeah. Yellow journalism, absolutely the connection we make is clickbait. Yeah, we do that in U.S. history all the time. Yep. Reforms at a national level. That's where I think you look at Roosevelt and Wilson, right? You look at all of Roosevelt's reforms, Hepburn, Pure Food and Drug Act, Meat Inspection Act, Newlands Act, National Forestry Service, national parks. Then you add all of Wilson's reforms, Clayton, Federal Trade Commission, Federal Reserve Act. Add to that 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th Amendment. There's an attempt to regulate child labor in the Keating-Owens child labor law. I mean, there's a lot of national reforms that we've talked about. Absolutely. Difference of Sherman Antitrust Act, government's willingness to use it. I mean, that to me is the biggest significance. We talked about in chapter 19, we've got Sherman and the government chooses not to apply it. And then you roll into chapter 20 and Teddy Roosevelt swinging Sherman Antitrust Act around like a club. So that, I think, that's a biggie. Dates. You should know 1912 election. You should know that's when we're going to get Taft versus Roosevelt versus Wilson. Okay. I want to real quick take a look because you are scaring me a little bit here. So Payne Aldrich is very much a topic which is going to split the Republican Party. Okay. So Payne Aldrich was meant to lower the tariffs. Kelsey, you're right on that. Here's what I want you to remember about Payne Aldrich. It angers old school Republicans, big business Republicans, progressive Republicans, because the tariff rate is always an angry topic. Big business Republicans are not at all happy that Taft was behind the lowering of rates. Progressive Republicans later on are going to be angry about Pinchot. So maybe we take Payne Aldrich, and our significance there is that Taft is willing to help the Republicans put his support behind lowering the tariff. Angers big business Republicans. That's part of the reason Roosevelt's coming back. Big business Republicans aren't happy with Taft. Progressive Republicans are going to bail on Taft after Pinchot, and so now nobody's happy. Underwood tariff is later going to lower them. Absolutely. You got it. But that's under Woodrow Wilson. That's not under Teddy Roosevelt. Okay. And David, when I say old guard Republicans, I'm talking old school big business Republicans that are business owners, monopoly owners, trust owners. Progressive Republicans are the people who followed Teddy Roosevelt from 1900 to 1907. The progressive Republicans are all in on the square deal. They're all in on conservation. They're different than the big business Republicans who really just care about business. Okay. Good job with Splendid Little War. American Medical Association is just one of those professional organizations. It's kind of an example of the progressives' desire for experts. Their not desire for experts. Their love for expertise and putting experts in charge. The progressives have real admiration for expertise. So stalwarts and half breeds, you go back. You got to go back a ways. So now you're in the late 1880s, 1890s. Believe it or not, today is the anniversary. January 16th. I saw this morning. January 16th is the anniversary of the Pendleton Civil Service Act. Right. So stalwarts and half breeds splitting the Republicans. You got to go back into the 1890s. I think Pendleton is an 1890s law. It's certainly before 1900. Stalwarts wanting to keep the spoil system. Half breeds want the Pendleton Civil Service Act. They want reform, and the half breeds are going to go ahead and win that argument. Insular cases. Does the Constitution follow the flag? The United States takes over Guam, and Guam becomes a piece of American territory. Do the Guamians now deserve constitutional protections? Do they deserve their rights under the Constitution, the Bill of Rights? And the answer is no. Eugene Debs, socialist leader, ends up in jail a few times because he is demanding the overthrow of capitalism. Yeah, Debs was the socialist guy. Is the test going to be? The tests are never date heavy, ever. It's a difficult test. Sorry, but it's true. You know, around when my daughter says stuff like that, my friend bombed the test. I always tell her you need better friends. She just gave me the skunk eye from across the room. What is the difference between this test and the other tests? I don't know. This one just, you know how this goes. Some of them are easier, some of them are tougher. C'est la vie. That's French. How many questions are on the test? 7,308. All worth 1/3 of a point. Yeah, there's just a lot. Chapters 19 and 20, there's a lot. All right, gang. Do your thing. Study, study, study. We will see you mañana. Have a great, great evening. Don't forget to get some sleep. One more day, and then you can take the weekend off. You guys have a great night. Thanks for the questions. See you.